Welcome to Icons. In Icons, we try to acquaint you with the different people, the events, and the places in the Bible. We have finished the first 5 books which together constitute the Pentateuch. We are in the books of history. We are now presently in the kingship of the house of David. We have finished the stories of David and Solomon and Jeroboam and Zeroboam, and now we have reached the reign of King Ahab with his wife Jezebel, and we also see the introduction of the prophet Elijah, one of the most powerful prophets in the history of Israel. We have a wonderful panel to help us in this discussion. We have with us Saujanya Mary. Saujanya is from Bangalore. She has finished a computer science course there, and she's doing a course here at the Divine Institute of Bible and Spirituality. Saujanya, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
We have with us Preeti Tresina. Preeti is also from Bangalore. She has finished her MSc in Software Systems, and she's here doing a course in the Divine Institute of Bible and Spirituality. Preeti, welcome to the program.
Thank you, brother.
We have with us Reverend Dr. Joseph Thundi Parmil. Father Joseph has done his PhD in Scripture from Rome. He is the mentor of our program. He's a very valued resource person here at the Divine Institute of Bible and Spirituality. He's a prolific writer, and he's also a valued resource person at the Pontifical Seminary in Alway. Father, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
We have with us Father Ratnaraj, who's from the OMI congregation from Sri Lanka. Father is also here doing a course at the Divine Institute of Bible and Spirituality. Father, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
We are still continuing the story of Ahab, Jezebel, and Elijah. We see the prophet Elijah completely relying on God for all that he does, wherever he goes, whatever he eats, what he says, what he does, everything. We also see the introduction of a new prophet, Prophet Elisha, who was chosen by the Lord to be a disciple of Elijah. We'll ask Father to help us continue from here. Father, could you help us, please?
Yes. After the death of Solomon in 931 BC, Israel was divided into 2 states.
Yes.
10 tribes in the northern side, that is northern Israel, and Samaria was the capital.
Yes.
And 2 tribes in the southern kingdom.
Yes.
Jerusalem is its capital. It continued for some time, but afterwards there was a real rivalry between the north and the south.
Yes.
Especially so in the northern kingdom. A number of kings were there, and especially the most notorious among them was King Ahab.
Yes.
So the 8th century BC was a very crucial period in the history of Israel. That is because the cult of Baal, it was already there in Canaan, but all the more fostered and encouraged by Queen Jezebel
Yes.
of Sidon. Ahab had married her, and when she came to Israel, that was the officially recognized religion. And Yahwism was almost in danger
Yes.
of being extinct. It is at that time that Elijah steps in. And he, with the boldness and the courage that is characteristic of the Old Testament prophet, he is confronting the king and the power structures. On Mount Carmel, he challenged them and proved that Yahweh is the true God.
Yes. Father, you had also mentioned in the earlier episode that Elijah was alone, standing alone against the whole nation of Israel.
Correct.
So what his courage must have been, what his faith must have been, what his conviction must have been. Thank you much, Father.
Father, how do you explain God's appearance to Elijah?
The prophet was fleeing from the wrath of Queen Jezebel, and he reached Horeb, the mountain of the Lord. There he sought refuge in a cave, and then God appeared to him and said, "Come out and wait before me." And therefore Elijah came out and then standing before the Lord. Then it is said, the Lord passed before him in different forms. There was a tempest, there was an earthquake, and there was fire. And it is explicitly stated, God was not in the tempest, in the earthquake, or in the fire. But then there came a small breeze, and God was in the breeze. What does it show? The mental situation of Elijah was like that of an earthquake. It was almost like a storm or fire. And God is saying that I am not in that. God has to be sought in the gentle breeze. So now Elijah was very zealous for the Lord. That is very clear, because he said, I am burning with zeal for the Lord of hosts. But then the Lord is teaching Elijah a lesson. So be quiet and realize that I am the Lord. And on that occasion, God is asking, what are you doing? Twice in the book of Kings, we find God asking Elijah, what are you doing? So that is an important question. It is not because God does not know what the prophet is doing, but what are you doing? This is not what you should be doing. That is the meaning. You have something else to do. So in a way, it was a corrective. The appearance of Yahweh to Elijah for the second time, also for the first time, it was a sort of corrective. So God has to be sought not in earthquake, not in tempest, nor even in fire, but he has to be sought in gentle bliss. So that's the significance of Yahweh's appearing to Elijah.
Thank you, Father.
Father God, how did God correct Elijah?
Elijah said, I am burning with zeal for the love of Yahweh. And he also added, they are killing your prophets, that I alone am left. But God said, I have kept 7,000 people who have not bowed their knee to Baal. So, but you are thinking that you are the only one. But that is not true. So what God is keeping a certain amount of people. So now you may be thinking that you are the only one who is left. But that is not true. So God is correcting him in a way. Because of the great enthusiasm, you exaggerate things. So this is always what happens. When we are too enthusiastic about something, we are likely to lose the proper perspective. We exaggerate things. Maybe in that blindness, we don't blame Elijah for that. For he said, I am burning. Zelo zelatusum pro domino exercitum. That is how it is said in Latin, very beautifully. That I am burning with zeal for the Lord of Yahweh. Okay, you are burning. But the Lord also showed him that God is not in the fire. But there is something more soberly to be taken. So therefore, it is in a way a lesson. You are enthusiastic, very good. But too much of enthusiasm can make the perspective not the proper one. So that is how God was correcting the prophet Elijah.
Here also we see how God is correcting the chosen people, no?
Yeah, in a way, what the prophet is told by Yahweh is also a corrective also to the people of Israel.
Yeah. Thank you, Father.
Father, what did God ask Elijah to do?
3 things he asked. First, go to Syria and anoint Hazael as the king of Syria. And then anoint Jehu as the king of Israel. And then choose, or rather appoint Elisha as your successor. So 3 things. And then the third thing is very important, because Elijah is going to disappear from the scene. In the midst of the zeal and enthusiasm, God is choosing another person as his successor. And that is something interesting. Nobody is indispensable for God. From what Elijah was doing so far, we have found that he was literally burning for Yahweh. And right there, God says, go and anoint Elisha as the prophet.
Thank you, Father.
Father, what is the significance of Elijah putting his mantle on Elisha?
God had asked Elijah to go and anoint or appoint Elisha as the prophet. Those days, the prophets had a distinct dress habit, and archaeologists and the biblical historians say it was made of wool. And that is also something that is said about John the Baptist. He had a mantle that was made with a camel's hair and all that. So that is why they were reminded of the Old Testament prophets, and specifically that of Elijah when they saw John the Baptist. Therefore, putting this particular mantle on Elisha by Elijah, so there is an indication that he is called to be a prophet, or rather called to join them. We have to also remember those days, it was a prophetic guild, what they call. In Hebrew we call it Bnei HaNevim. So there was used to be a leader, and there used to be a group of disciples. So most probably Elijah is inviting Elisha to join his group. So that's what we are seeing later in the story of both of these people. And therefore putting the mantle on Elisha signifies that Elisha is called by Elijah to join him as a prophet.
Father, I just had a little confusion. I'll just read that verse. 1 Kings 19, verse 19 onwards. So he set out from there and found Elisha, son of Shaphat, who was plowing. There was 12 yoke of oxen ahead of him, and he was with the 12th. Elijah passed by him and threw his mantle over him. So this is almost like as if Elisha doesn't even know what is going to happen. He's not even prepared for it. He's not getting officially invited into the guild. Elijah just puts his mantle on him while he's passing by.
Yeah.
So is that something to do with the Spirit of the Lord that
More than what the Spirit is guiding Elijah to do, we have to think about the background of Elijah. Elijah in the history of Israel was a well-known person. So Elisha must have already heard about him. So with 12 pair of oxen, they were plowing, must have been a rich farmer.
rich, yes.
And then Elijah passing by, he throwing his mantle. So that is an indication, come after me.
Thank you, Father. Thank you.
Father, how do you assess Elisha's response?
So that is very interesting. It is not observed there that Elijah invited Elisha to join him.
Yes.
And Elijah was passing by. And it is said, Elisha running after him,
Yes.
he is saying, now let me go and kiss my parents. So kissing the parents is taking some sort of farewell to them. And then Elijah said, go. But then what Elisha did was, he took one pair of oxen and killed it and made a feast, served that meat to his fellow workers, and joined Elijah and was his disciple, it is said. That small expression there towards the end of chapter 19, that he was a disciple to him. That is an indication that he joined the group of the disciples, and Elijah was the head, and he was actually being prepared. Because God had told him to anoint Elisha as the prophet, meaning thereby that Elisha has to take the leadership of that group.
Thank you, Father.
Father, how did Ben-Hadad confront the king Ahab of Israel?
Very boastful. And King Ben-Hadad of Syria, he sent messengers to King Ahab and said, your gold and your silver is mine. Likewise, your wives and the women in your harem, they also belong to me. So a kind of boastful. And it's also said there were 32 kings supporting Ben-Hadad.
Yes.
That means he was a big man, having a lot of influence. So the specific mentioning about 32 bands of local leaders, so to say, that shows he was a mighty man. And the king of Israel was rather timid at that time. So when he was threatened like this, your gold and your silver is mine, your women and your wives are mine, etc. Now the king of Israel, Ahab, just yielded and said, yes, my lord, it is so.
Thank you, Father.
Father, why did God send a prophet to King Ahab?
The historical background was when King Ben-Hadad sent his messengers saying that your silver and gold is mine, and your women and your wives also are mine. And then the king Ahab of Israel said, yes, it is so. Second time he said, tomorrow at this time, my officers will be coming and plundering the houses of all your officers. So in addition to the silver and gold, now these people are going to come and plunder the offices and the houses of the leaders of Israel. When it was communicated like this, then the king said no. That is too much. And it's also said the king of Ben-Hadad, together with his comrades or friends, they were drinking. Therefore, at that moment, he's also boasting himself as if he's managing the show. And he said, the God of Israel is the God of mountains. Therefore, if we are going to fight with the Israelites on the plain ground, we are going to win. So they are looking at Yahweh as a small local God having his sovereignty or power only on the mountain side. So to some extent we can say drinking must have taken away his real awareness or sense of judging.
Thank you, Father.
Father, why did Ben-Hadad lose the battle?
So there is a religious reason given for that. Because Ben-Hadad said to his friends, the other kings, it is said he had 32 kings with him, the God of Israel, it is only a God of the mountains.
Yes.
Therefore, if we are going to fight with him, we are going to win. They could not understand or appreciate who Yahweh is.
Yes.
So confining Yahweh as a local God, as one of their perhaps main gods, instead of seeing Yahweh as the king of the universe, the one who manages, now it was to some extent belittling Yahweh.
Yes.
So that was the reason why Ben-Hadad lost according to the sacred writer. Because God wanted to show that I am not only the God of mountain, but also of the plain.
Father, I also wanted to ask you, this is the same Ben-Hadad, the king who had helped King Asa of Jerusalem against the northern territories, right? In the first book of Kings, in the earlier portion.
There is a possibility, but chronologically,
It could not have been.
It could not have been, because Ahab is coming almost 50 years after the king Asa, or it can be another king with the same name.
Okay.
But such details about history, we are not very sure.
Okay. Father, I want to ask you here, when Elijah throws his mantle on Elisha to anoint him as a disciple, we also see in the New Testament when Jesus also, someone comes to him to say, Master, shall I follow you? And he says, follow me right now. And he says, shall I go back home and look after my family members and then follow you? What is the context, Father?
The call which Jesus gives to somebody and the call of Elijah, there is a substantial difference. The call to discipleship which Jesus gives, you have to respond immediately. And that is why when that young man said, first I want to go and bury my father.
Yes.
Jesus said, let the dead bury their dead. What does it mean? Now, you have found life, and that is why you are telling that I want to follow you. So, now that you have found life, you are no more dead. You are a person who is fully alive.
Yes.
Therefore, let the dead bury the dead. So, it is for such, this kind of worldly things, according to the vision of Jesus, should not be taken literally. That is for those who have not found what real life is. The desire to become a disciple of Jesus is a sign that you have come to life.
Then
and
you
now,
should not go back.
The response should be immediate. Therefore, leave the rest of the things to them, but you have to follow me. But then Elijah is something different.
Yes.
The call that he is giving, so that is in the Old Testament period.
Yes.
But there is something very interesting again. And when Elisha ran after Elijah, having thrown his mantle upon him, and then he says, you go. What have I done to you?
Yes, he says that. He says, what have I done to you?
Okay. But that has to be taken as a sarcastic remark. Do you realize what I have done to you?
Not the literal meaning. It's actually there is another inference there.
Maybe the tone. What have I done to you? Do you realize that?
Do you realize what I have done?
Do you realize what I have done? And that is why no further mention is made about Elisha's going home and having embraced or kissed his parents.
He follows
nothing
straight
of
away.
That. He follows straight away.
Father, in Jesus' time, there is always a sense of urgency. He always says, repent, the time is at hand, time is near.
Yeah.
Is it the reason why Jesus says, let the dead bury their own dead? Do you dissociate from
Because when Jesus appears in Galilee, having undergone the baptism and also the temptation, then he comes, time is at hand. So the end time. So there is a sense of urgency. So that must be also the reason why when Jesus extends an invitation to somebody, the response should be immediate. Therefore, there is no time for you to go and bury the dead and all that. But then, now that you have found life in me, you belong to the level of those who have found life. Therefore, you have to respond to that. Don't postpone.
Once we have a call for a mission, immediately we have to dissociate ourselves
That's
from
what
the
Jesus
worldly
means.
things.
Correct.
And relationships also.
Yeah.
I think, Father, even in all the apostles, like Matthew was tax collector, Jesus said, come follow me. And the word says he just got up and left.
Yeah.
And,
The sons of Zebedee,
yes,
they were mending the net
nets.
there. When Jesus invited them, they got up, left their father Zebedee with their workers, and followed him. So there must have been also such a power in Jesus' words.
Yes.
Come and follow me. And it's also possible that these people must have heard about Jesus already as a preacher.
Thank you much, Father. Viewers, thank you very much for being with us on this episode. We see how Elisha becomes a disciple of Elijah, learning from him the ways to serve the Lord. Till we meet next time, stay blessed.